If you think turbulence on a plane is all about bumpy rides and spilled drinks, you've never seen a first-class showdown that can freeze an entire cabin in its tracks. Picture this. A silver-haired woman, all pearls and cashmere, standing in the aisle, pointing her manicured finger in my face, telling me, "I don't care what your ticket says. You need to move to the back. I've been flying first class for 30 years, and I'm not about to share it with." And she let her eyes sweep down my charcoal suit, making sure everyone knew exactly what she meant. In that moment, you could feel the oxygen just vanish from the air. Phones went up, heads turned, and I felt every muscle in my body tense with the kind of anger you only get when dignity is on the line. Let me back up a second. Just the day before, I'd been sitting in my office at the Philadelphia FBI field office, finally closing the biggest case of my career. 3 years deep undercover. And at dawn, we arrested Richard Donovan, pharma CEO, king of backroom deals, a man whose greed fed the opioid crisis and left 1,000 families broken. Should have felt victorious, right? All I could think about was my mom's 75th birthday in Atlanta. I'd promised my sister Marlene, after missing Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Dad's funeral, this time I would be there. But if you've ever tried to serve justice and be a good daughter at the same time, you know the math never adds up. So the next morning, we put Donovan in cuffs. The man just looked at me, dead calm, and said, "My lawyers will have me out by lunch. Then we'll see about your career." I'd heard threats before, but this one felt cold as the wind off the river. Didn't matter. I had a flight to catch, and a promise to keep. At the airport, I felt that familiar prickly sense. Maybe someone's following me. Maybe it's just my nerves. I checked every reflection, every tailing car. It's the burden you carry after years in the bureau and after crossing men who think the law is beneath them. I'd splurged for first class. Figured after a week like this, I'd earned the right to stretch out and maybe, just maybe, breathe. I took my seat, 3A by the window, eyes on the boarding line, and watched the parade of passengers file in. Then she arrived. Katharine Jefferson, Southern royalty in every gesture. I recognized her, maybe from the merger files between her company and Donovan's, maybe just the type. The air around her was different, sharp, expectant. She sat next to me, gave me a look that took in everything about me in one sweep, then offered a smile as tight as a bank vault. Before takeoff, a young black woman, a law student named Zora, it turned out, got upgraded and took her seat just across the aisle. Catherine's face soured immediately. "They're just giving away first class these days," she muttered, loud enough for the whole row to hear. I bit my tongue. 23 years of bureau training teach you when to observe, when to act. Sometimes silence is louder than any retort. But it didn't stop there. When some turbulence knocked Zora's laptop under Catherine's seat, Catherine recoiled like the girl was contagious. She started barking at the crew, demanding the air marshal, wanting Zora removed, her voice rising with every invented slight. I watched Zora handle it with the kind of calm most people never master. A third-year law student. Top of her class, on her way to clerk for the Georgia Supreme Court. "I paid for this seat myself," she said, voice steady. "And I earned every point that upgraded me. Just so we're clear." Phones were out, people recording, the crew caught in that awkward limbo between customer service and actual safety. And Catherine, she was on a tear, throwing her weight around. Calling me an accomplice, her words tipping from privileged to dangerous. Then, when her accusations started aiming at me, something snapped. You ever have a moment where you just know it's time to stand up? Where you realize silence would be the real betrayal? So I stood, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out my badge. "Ma'am," I said, "I think there's a misunderstanding about who you're talking to." The look on her face, shocked, disbelieving, that perfect mask shattered, will be with me forever. "Special Agent Elena Jenkins, FBI? Now, would you like to rethink your position, or shall we bring federal air marshals into this at 30,000 feet? You could have heard a pin drop. Catherine's bluster evaporated. She stumbled back into her seat, muttering about misunderstandings, but everyone saw the truth. Zora caught my eye, just mouthed, "Thank you." And I felt, for a moment, like maybe I'd done something right, something that mattered beyond protocols and policies. When we landed in Atlanta, my brother James was waiting. "You're famous now, sis," he said. Waving his phone, my confrontation had already gone viral. Home was a flurry of family, food, hugs, side eyes about my job, and the quiet pride in my mother's eyes that said more than words ever could. I tried to let the chaos of the last day melt away in the smell of collard greens and sweet tea, but trouble has a way of following you home. The woman I'd faced on that plane? Turns out she was more than just a random bigot. She was the wife of a sitting senator and a board member in the very industry I was investigating. That night, as family gathered, I got a message. Impressive performance, Agent Jenkins. But you've made powerful enemies. Watch your back. Old fears crept in, but this time I wasn't alone. My family circled up, brothers and law enforcement. Mother with nerves of steel, everyone ready to defend our own. Nobody threatens a Jenkins in this house, Mom said, and I believed her. But here's the thing, justice isn't a single courtroom win. And courage isn't always about flashing a badge. Sometimes, it's holding your ground when the world is watching. Sometimes it's letting your family help you carry the weight. And sometimes it's knowing you'll pay a price for doing what's right. The next day, I got called back to Philly for an emergency hearing. Donovan's lawyers spinning my confrontation into claims of bias. The Jeffersons leaning on their power. The whole system pressing down to see if I'd break. In court, every glance, every answer, every part of my record got torn apart. But I told the truth. I stood my ground. The judge let the case move forward but ordered a review of my conduct, a shadow over my career that might never lift. That evening, alone in my apartment, I called my mom. She just said, "You did what was right, not what was easy." That's all I've ever asked. And I realized, maybe that's enough. I don't know where this story ends. There'll be more hearings, more confrontations, more days when I wonder if the fight is worth it. But if you're listening, ask yourself, if you were in my shoes, would you stay silent or stand up? Would you risk your peace for a stranger's dignity? For a principle? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about justice, about right and wrong, about family, and what it means to do the hard thing when it matters most. Because, in the end, that's what changes the world. One stand, one choice, one moment at a time. That you'd think after all that, the plane, the courtroom, the viral videos, I'd get a breather. Maybe a quiet night with a glass of wine and my phone turned off. But life, especially when you work for the Bureau, never lets you rest on your laurels. Not when the powers lined up against you don't play by the rules, and certainly not when family is on the line. The night after the hearing, I was back in my Philadelphia apartment, staring out over the city lights, half-empty glass in my hand, replaying every second from the courtroom. My phone buzzed with texts from my brothers. James sending a thumbs up. Michael warning me to watch my back. Marlene's message just a string of heart emojis. I'd like to say I slept, but the truth is I just lay there in the dark, listening to city sounds, wondering if I'd made my life too much about the badge and not enough about everything else. Morning came early, sunlight already too bright as I pulled on my running shoes. Mind spinning with the judge's words. We will conduct a separate review of Agent Jenkins' conduct in the Jefferson incident. The whole thing stuck to me like a bad smell. Even when you do everything by the book, sometimes the book gets rewritten on you. You know what I mean? The Bureau sent a security detail that morning, plainclothes agents in a nondescript sedan, shadowing me to the field office, all tight nods and earpieces. Carson, my deputy director, called me in for a briefing. His eyes looked heavier than usual. Donovan's legal team is working overtime. They're pushing every button they can find. If they can paint you as reckless or biased, they'll blow up 3 years of work. He handed me a folder with press clippings. Headlines swirling with words like racial bias, abuse of authority, viral agent. I'd always known my job came with risks, but I never pictured being torn apart in the court of public opinion. Still, I got up, showed up, did my job. What else was there to do? The team was counting on me, and somewhere, out there, so were 100 families who lost loved ones to Donovan's pills. I promised myself and them that I wouldn't let him wriggle off the hook. A few days went by in a blur, meetings, phone calls, interviews with the Bureau's Office of Professional Responsibility. They asked me about my state of mind on the flight, about whether I'd recognized Katharine Jefferson, about protocol, about race. Each question like a paper cut, small but cumulative. I answered honestly, my voice steady even as my hands shook under the table. There's a loneliness to being the one on the hot seat, even if you know in your gut you did the right thing. And all the while, messages kept coming. Support from strangers, people who'd seen the video, thanking me for standing up. Hate mail, too. Accusing me of everything from playing the race card to being a deep state shill. That's America, 2025. Everyone's got a camera, everyone's got an opinion, and the truth gets chewed up in the middle. What kept me centered, honestly, was my family. My mother called every evening, her voice soft but solid. "You eat anything today?" she'd ask. "Don't let these people make you forget who you are." "Elena, your father would be proud." Even on the toughest days, those words kept my spine straight. Meanwhile, the threats weren't letting up. One night after dinner, I caught sight of a black SUV idling outside my building. Engine running, windows tinted dark. Was it just a neighbor waiting for someone, or something else? After what happened in Atlanta, with that strange vehicle tailing me on my run, I didn't take chances. I reported it to the bureau, and my security detail doubled up, but a pit opened up in my gut that wouldn't close. I started carrying my backup piece everywhere, checking under my car, watching my six. That kind of vigilance, it seeps into your bones. And then, in the middle of all this, Zora Carter, the law student from the plane, called me out of the blue. "Agent Jenkins, I hope I'm not bothering you," she said, voice careful, almost apologetic. "I just wanted to let you know. Someone's been asking about me at my clerkship. Someone connected to Senator Jefferson. She told me they wanted to know if we'd ever met before, if I'd shared any details of the case." The politics were getting personal now, and I could hear the worry behind her words. "Don't let them rattle you," I told her, but it felt thin even to my own ears. "They're just trying to muddy the waters, Zora. You keep your head up. You did nothing wrong." She thanked me, and before she hung up, she said, "Seeing you stand up like that, it made me believe I could, too." That meant something. One afternoon, Carson pulled me aside, lowered his voice. "The Jeffersons and Donovan have filed formal complaints. This could drag on. OPR will want you off the case during the review." My stomach dropped. Off the case? After everything? I wanted to fight, to argue, but all I could do was nod and promise to keep my phone close. I drove home that night, mind racing, heart pounding. The city was lit up in gold and purple, people out walking dogs, grabbing dinner, living ordinary lives. I envied them. For a moment, I wondered if I could just quit, walk away, be someone whose greatest worry was whether the Eagles would win this Sunday. But you know that's not who I am. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I called my mother again. "Mama, what if it's not enough? What if doing what's right isn't enough?" She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Elena, you were born with your daddy's stubbornness. You keep doing right, even when it's hard. That's how you change the world, honey, one fight at a time." Morning brought more news. Donovan's lawyers had filed an emergency injunction, trying to have all my undercover evidence tossed out. I was scheduled to testify again, this time with the whole country watching. I put on my suit, straightened my badge, and walked into that courthouse determined not to let them see me sweat. On the stand, Donovan's attorney tried to twist everything. The confrontation on the plane, my family history, even my tone of voice. "Would you say, Agent Jenkins, that you hold a personal grudge against pharmaceutical executives?" she asked, voice syrupy sweet. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Ma'am, what I hold is a grudge against anyone who profits from suffering. If that makes me biased, so be it." When the judge ruled that my evidence would stand, but ordered a separate review of my conduct. It wasn't the clean win I dreamed of, but it was enough to keep the case alive, and that was all I could ask. Afterward, standing outside the courthouse, cameras flashing, people shouting questions, I felt something unexpected, a kind of peace. Because for once, I'd stood up not just for the job, but for myself, for Zora, for anyone who ever got told they didn't belong in first class. I'm not naive. I know this fight isn't over. Donovan still has his money, the Jeffersons their power, and I've still got a target on my back. But I also have my badge, my family, and the stubborn, unshakable conviction that right is right, no matter who's watching. So, if you made it this far, tell me, when it comes down to it, what would you risk for what's right? Would you take the easy way out, or would you stand up, consequences be damned? Let me know below. The world's watching, and I'm listening. And somewhere out there, so are all the folks waiting for someone to prove that justice can still mean something. Maybe, just maybe, that someone is you.